Hi, I'm Whack.
Hey, and I'm Pat. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Weekly Orbit. This week ending Friday, November 15th. We got an exciting show. We've got really hot markets. We've got possible rocket pool rebranding. We're going to be talking our ETH ideas. We're going to talk about possible ETF staking and a whole lot more. Whack, how you been doing this week? Pretty good?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a mixed bag actually, because while crypto as a whole is doing really well, my bags aren't doing so well. So it's
Yeah.
one of those situations where it's like, yay, oh no, at the same time. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's fine
I
though. It's all
know.
good.
We're going to get into that. So let's take a look at the markets. Ethereum right now, it's had a little bit of a pullback overnight. We're at 3,126 in US dollar terms. If we look at the week, we're up 11%. This is Bitcoin has been really tearing it up. I don't. Let's click on that just for a minute because it is the king and it's been ripping. I think the ETH BTC ratio is probably nearing its bottom. In the 7 days, it's up 19% compared to Ethereum's 11. Altcoins. Let's take a look at this. So I got this chart from TradingView. All right, what this shows is the last month. We've got RPL in orange. We've got ETH in purple, and we've also got what TradingView calls the other. This is the alt market. So it's everything except the top 10 coins. And if you can look at this chart, you can see that ETH is just running away with it. Over the last month, ETH is up like 27%. RPL is down about 5 or 6%, and the rest of the altcoin market is down about 12.5. So this kind of gives you the broader view that the big boys are leading this charge since election day. Altcoins are suffering in comparison. But we've seen this before in prior markets. Wack, you've been around longer than I have. You've seen multiple cycles. And typically it looks like BTC and then ETH and then altcoins, and then we eventually blow up and we get a bear. Have you felt this before, in the past where you've gone through cycles, you're like, wait, here's my bags and this bag is going up and this bag is going down and you're feeling stressed. I hope that historically we repeat, but tell me your thoughts.
Yeah, so right now I'm thinking very much like we are like in the fall, like slash Q4 of 2020. And like ETH in that bear market, like, between 2018 and 2020, basically, it was existential, right? Like people thought ETH was going to die, it was going to have no use cases. Staking, that was promised was being redesigned from scratch. Like we just didn't know what was going to happen. And, in 2018, 2019, basically, and then 2020 comes along and people are just like, hey, you don't need ETH. You can have BTC for your money and you can have DeFi tokens for, the other end of the barbell. And that's good enough. And, for DeFi summer in 2020, DeFi tokens went wild. ETH was just like, I'm going to sit here and do nothing. And everything was like, all of the ETH ecosystem tokens were outperforming ETH, the DeFi tokens. And it was just wild. Like, and as the year went on, it's the alt layer ones that really started to shine. And this was the beginning of the Sol Lunavax trade, Sol, Terra Luna, and Avalanche, like AVAX. So people were starting to put money into those alts, and those were outperforming. In 2019, actually, ETH got flipped by XRP, from Ripple, and that just tells you, like ETH was in a really bad state. And by the end of 2020, BTC had hit a new all-time high. It reached above $20,000. It's actually a little bit later than this. It was in December when it did that. And ETH was lagging behind. Like I think going into October, November, it was still in the like $400 price range, somewhere around there, $400 or $500. It ended the year okay, like getting up to like $600 or $700. But BTC by this point was over 20,000. And, people are like, ETH is dead. Why would you have ETH? There's no need to have ETH. You should just have these alt layer ones. You have the DeFi tokens. There's no need for ETH anymore. That sounds kind of familiar to what people are saying right now, right? But anyway, January 1st comes around, and I talked about this on my show in detail because I remember living through this and I was like, what on earth is this? This is like incredible. So, I was holding ETH at the time. It was my biggest bag. And January 1st comes around, and I guess, people, they reset their profit loss statements for the year. And, January 1st comes around and they're just like, what do I do now? And I think a whole lot of interest that was on the sidelines just came into ETH. There was shorts that got squeezed. Like, it was just incredible. Like, that first week of January 2021 was just like kind of face melting. Like, ETH pretty much doubled in price. It went
Right.
from, $600-700 all the way up to $1,200-1,300. There were a couple of days in there that we went up 40% over the course of 2 days on January the 2nd and January 3rd. And
Jeez.
honestly, like for an
That's
asset that size, like
crazy.
it was $700 and it went up to like $1,200-1,300 in that week. So, the ratio was low, everything was bad. And it just, I think, people were just waiting to reposition. And once that reposition happened, then ETH was just flying for the rest of the year. And there were tokens that outperformed ETH. There were like Sol did really well like in that year. It went from $1 or $2 basically all the way up to 250 or thereabouts. And that of course outperformed ETH. Even Cardano outperformed ETH. I think it went up 300x from 1 cent to $3 or somewhere around there. And ETH, just did 60x, right? Just did 60x, but from the low to the high. So I think just 60x. So from that perspective, there's always going to be a coin or a token that is
Yeah.
going to outperform the token you have, right? Because there's only one token that is the best performing asset. And this time it's likely to be some meme coin or something that will go from, whatever to $10 billion or whatever, right? And the thing they have to remember is ETH is $300-400 billion asset right now. Like, to move that is not that easy, like you can't get it to go up those valuations. And we're going to be talking about this later, but like looking at what's happening with ETH right now, I really do think that it's primed for a really big move. And I don't know if that's going to come the first week of January again, but I'm kind of thinking that it might do. But I think right now, BTC is just storming ahead, like, $93,000, like outpacing all expectations, like a lot of talk about nation states buying ETH and all this kind of stuff. So, it has the whole narrative drive right now, and that is just the way it is. There's nothing that we can do about it. We just have to wait. But one of the lessons that I learned, from that cycle is, if you try to chase the pump, you will get burned, right? So
Oh
the
yeah.
what I mean by that is, say for example you're in Dogecoin, right? Like you're holding Doge, and
Yeah.
Doge is just flat, 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 and you're seeing Sol is starting to move. For example, you'll sell all your Doge and go to Sol. Then what almost always happens is like Sol just goes flat and then Doge goes on a 150% run, right? Like, so this is the time where you make your conviction bets, like you allocate your tokens into projects that you think are worthwhile, that are strong, that are good. And then after that, you just wait. And you're not going to outperform Pepe. You're not going to outperform, like, whatever
Right.
the flavor meme coin is of that day. Like, and you have to resign yourself to that, thinking, okay, I'm not going to outperform every single token in the market. But what I am going to do is, invest in this asset that I believe in. And those risk adjusted returns, those are the ones that, you want to keep your eye on. And, I don't think ETH is going to get you a 60x this cycle, sadly. But hey, if it does like a 20x or even a 30x, like even like a 10x would take us to like nearly $9,000. And in all honesty, I think that's on the lower end of my hopes for ETH. Like, I don't think ETH is just going to 3x from here until the end of the cycle. I hopefully it'll outperform that, but we'll just have to wait and see, how it does. But I think there's really good things ahead this year, and we're starting to see signs of that right now, that, people are paying attention to ETH. But of course, we'll talk about that later in the episode.
Yeah. ETH, it's a different, each cycle is a little different. Like this cycle, we've
Mm-hmm.
got ETFs, which mainstream investing in, BTC and ETH. How does that affect the top, your top predictions? But also, the bigger the asset, like you said, the bigger the asset becomes, the more money it takes to move the price. We're seeing, gigantic, well, relative to ETH, like 5 to 7 times more money going into BTC ETFs, but the price isn't going 7 times more than ETH in price in percentages. BTC is like a 4.5 times bigger asset right now than ETH, so it takes 4.5 times more money to kind of move the price $1 or $1,000. So there's that. I was surprised when I saw Doge just tearing it up. They went from like 10 cents to, it's at 39 cents now.
40. Yeah.
I just didn't think, talk about a big asset. I mean, I think Doge was like number 10 or 11. It's up
Yeah.
number 6 now.
6.
I didn't think I had another monster run in it, to be honest, like it has in the last week. You 4x'd in a week. Well, in about the last 2 weeks, let's say, basically 3 or 4x'd. It's just crazy. But what's going to happen is like, oh, if you thought, oh, Doge, let me jump in the bandwagon there. Oh, guess what? You've missed it. And people are now going on to the next, flashy coin.
Peanut.
Yeah. And, I wanted to, last week I gave kind of an alternative economic forecast that could impact crypto into 2025, thinking about, rising interest rates, maybe tariffs, increasing prices and inflation, which puts the brakes on the Fed, cutting rates. That's all fundamental stuff. But then I was, chatting with Anthony Sassano, and he was saying, in these bull cycles, sometimes it's like fundamentals don't matter. It's about momentum, and FOMO counters everything. And so that's why we've seen, I remember in the last cycle, towards I'll call it stage 3. Stage 1 is BTC, stage 2 ETH, stage 3 is everything else. And you'll see really crappy shit coins just pumping for no fundamental reason. It's just because people have got money and they're speculating on the next thing.
Yeah.
And you get one former Federal Reserve chairman, you say irrational exuberance, right? That it infects the market. And then all of a sudden things just kind of blow up and we go back into the bear. We'll see if that repeats. I'm with you. My largest holding is ETH. My second largest is RPL. RPL is not doing that great. But in relative terms to all the other altcoins, as we see in this chart, over the last month, it's actually doing a little better than everything else. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough when you see one thing going up and the other bag not doing so well. Maybe in 6 months, that's reversed. I don't know.
What we need to remember is that, this RPL is the token that most of the people in our community actually have in their banks. And with RPL, it's a bit behind, right? People are just really raw feeling. And that's the that we have is this too close for us, so we can't see past it. I think I tried to make an effort in trading the day to, compare RPL performance since the election to other tokens, right? And there was this idea that there's a fee switch, right? And that's kind of become a meme in the Ethereum sphere now, where with the fee switch, you have this idea that there's this token, a protocol is accruing value, and it's going to give value to its token holders. Now, that was obviously like a big no-no under the Democratic government. It seems like all, the Republican incoming government is just going to be like, yeah, free for all, go for it, guys, do whatever you want kind of situation. So right as the election, was going towards Donald Trump, Lido's LDO, Uniswap's Uni token, Aave, like these tokens pumped big, right? Like, had 30-40% gains, and people were looking at RPL, with like a 10 or 15% gain, and they were just like, what is RPL doing? Like, this coin is trash, garbage, whatever. Sentiment was just really bad. But on my show, look, I looked a couple of days ago and I was like, let's look at the 1 week performance since the election and see how RPL is stacking up to these other coins that people were saying were amazing just last week. Let's have a look. So it actually outperformed Lido after the election. Like, I think it was like 20% for Lido versus 25% for RPL. It was pretty much right on track with Uniswap, like, 26 for 25, something like that. And Aave was actually performing a little bit better, like 35%. But the point I was trying to make was, we are so tunnel focused on just seeing what RPL is doing, and it's like seeing all this negative news, the new low price against ETH, new low price against dollar, blah, blah, blah. And we're so fixated on that we can't take a step back and just look at the wider picture. Now, this could be pure quote from me. Like, I'm totally the first to acknowledge that. I've got an RPL bag. I want RPL to perform well. It hasn't performed well. What I'm saying, you could totally construe it as corp, right? Like, this is just me saying these words to make myself feel better because I have a token that isn't performing well. However, like, I think I'm trying to be objective. Like, is RPL going to hit new all-time highs against ETH this cycle? I don't know. I don't think so. Like, that there was just so much exuberance into the Atlas, irrational exuberance into the Atlas launch. I don't know if we're going to capture that again, but hey, we've got Saturn 1 and Saturn 2 coming up, and those are lining up pretty well with the bull market, the getting into that period. It might do, you know what I mean? If it captures the attention, who knows what will happen? So I'm not saying that, RPL is going to take us to Mars or whatever, like to the moon, any of that kind of stuff, but will it outperform like ETH from now to the end of the cycle? I'm hoping so, and that's why I've got an allocation of RPL. Is it going to outperform Bitcoin between now and the end of the cycle? I hope so, and that's why I have an allocation of RPL. Is it going to hit those highs again? I don't think so. Our Atlas 400 RPL was 1 ETH. Now it's 10,000 RPL. Sorry, not ETH. 1 Bitcoin. 400 RPL was 1 Bitcoin, and now it's 10,000 RPL is 1 Bitcoin. So we've gone down like 95, 96% against BTC. I think that we're going to bounce back from here, but we just need the market attention to shift, and we need to enter the next part of the market. And I think that might be sadly until January. So we've got another 6 weeks potentially of negative sentiment. ETH will move,
Yep.
ETH ecosystem tokens will move. And then we're all going to be like, hey, why didn't we buy more? And that's always going to be the situation. So yeah, I don't think there's any
The
avoiding
traders
that.
too. These guys who do it for a full-time job. At some point, they might when there's finally like a pullback on say BTC. They sell, they make a really nice profit, and then okay, let's buy down the stack a little bit. Let's do ETH, and then altcoins. That's how it kind of goes, because now you've made all this money. Where am I going to put it? Where am I going to allocate it next? So we'll keep an eye on markets, but let's focus over to some other news, rocket pool news. Sleety had a really nice post here, Wack, you had on your show yesterday that I want to highlight. He says, since there was talk about a rebrand, what do you all think of this less radical facelift? Okay, really, it's just a proposed modernization of the logo. And he puts this in, and this is really nice. I agree with you. It shows, for those listeners can't see the screen, it basically takes the existing rocket, puts it at like a 45-degree angle. It puts some swirls in for the smoke, and I think we've got there it is. The existing one is kind of plain. I think it's a cool idea. I think that it sticks with the orange and the white. I think it puts a little fresh face without, it's not like we're going to Sky, like Maker did, where you complete rebrand, different name and everything else. Maybe just a refresh is a kind of a cool idea. What do you think?
Yeah, so this has been a discussion in the community for the last few days, and I think it honestly is linked to the price action, where people are disappointed by the price action. They're like, do something. This idea of go on devs, like do something, like save us kind of situation,
Yeah.
and like that. Like there's only so many things we can do, right? Because a few of the things, first of all, the RPL token and the rETH token are contractually like anchored into the protocol. Like the ticker for those are anchored into the protocol. There's no way to change that. Those contracts are immutable. So even if you did want to rebrand, and people are coming up with new names and all sorts of things like that, like what we can do, you can't change the RPL and RE things. So at that point, you're very limited by what you can do, right? Now, a rebrand, I think, not a rebrand, sorry, a facelift, I think makes a lot of sense. But I think the time to do this was with the website 2.0 launch, because this logo, like, it really holds on to all the things that you know from the rocket pool logo. There's a rocket, there's smoke, the rocket's tilted at 45 degrees. It's just this so much nicer, cleaner, sleeker image. I love it. Like, I really think that the team should have taken this on board. Like, if you actually scroll down, Sleety in a later message just a little while later said that basically this, like, he had suggested it to the team. You might have to scroll down, like, a little bit more to Sleety's next message. So he said that he suggested the one after this. Sorry,
After the one after the butt plug comment.
yeah, that's right. The one after the butt plug comment. But he said that, look, when the team was working on the website, facelift, at that point, Sleety did a lot of the art for the new website, and he actually suggested this. And he said this proposal was rejected by the team last year, and it's fine. It's their prerogative, right? Like they own the branding, I guess, for it. But I really feel like they missed the beat with this, and I think that having that facelift would have been absolutely like beautiful. It's just such a nice, much nicer logo. But I guess that, the real, like, we need to think about where the real, like, core of this argument is coming from. And that's fine. Some people have had long-term grievances about, the way Rocket Pool is branded. The website did go a long way to alleviating a lot of those concerns, because the new website is just so much better than the old website. But the fact is that, when the price is bad and people just want something that they can, like, kind of rile against, the branding, of course, always is one of those things that they like to, rile against. Saying the name sucks, the name's too memey, it's not serious enough, and the logo's horrible, the orange is blah blah blah, and it just piles on. But I think it's more of a symptom of the price than anything else, really.
Oh, absolutely. I played hockey most of my life, and I follow professional hockey, and it's every team or professional sports you're watching. Yeah, I know you love soccer, football. Your team, you can pick out all the warts, but you know what solves all that is if you're winning. If you're winning,
Exactly.
it covers up all the mistakes, covers up the weak play of this player or that player. It's just winning solves everything. And same with in markets. When the price is going well, people are happy. They don't think about branding. They don't think about logos.
Exactly.
But it gives us something to talk about. Let's move on to the next thing and talk about it's kind of related in branding, and it's how do we talk about Rocket Pool to the greater public? And Valdorf had a real nice post here. If you want to have, I guess, what's the elevator pitch when you talk to people about Rocket Pool? And he says, I think we should be shooting for risk-adjusted APY, and ethos and diversification. So with risk adjusted, he says governance is something, comparing us to Lido, where the governance is so concentrated over at Lido. And we talk about ethos. He says, we are wildly outsized proportion of home stakers. Ethereum being incredibly neutral makes Ethereum more valuable. And finally, diversification. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. It's dangerous. Hey, if you like STETH, it's a great product. STETH is... you can find it on every DeFi platform. It's widely available. It is a good product, but putting all your eggs in one basket can be not such a smart thing. So hey, why don't you put an allocation towards rETH too? So this kind of goes to the bigger question about rETH. rETH we've been having some issues the last couple of weeks with it's trading at a discount on the secondary markets. We haven't had much going into the deposit pool, which is related to it. And so we're trying to, it seems like community, we're going to talk about in a moment, of how can we make rETH a stronger product and in general Rocket Pool. But I think we, as marketers, we should, all get on the same page. I remember prior to Atlas, we were all talking about how RPL was leveraged ETH. That was like a meme we were throwing around. We kind of have to come up with something, for this cycle. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so like you said, this is a related kind of point of discussion compared to the branding one as well. Is like, how do we market our ETH, right? That's our product, that's what we want to sell. We want to make sure that we are giving as good a go as possible, as making it attractive to as many people as possible. I really liked Val's points here. I think that they're succinct, they're to the point, like they're really illuminating as well about the benefits of our ETH. And what we need is people to mint our ETH, right? Like, thankfully, sadly, the peg is a real issue right now. We are about half a percentage point from where we want to be. And that means that people will be buying our ETH on the secondary market instead of coming to the deposit pool, which means we've got 192 validators waiting for ETH in the deposit pool before they can start their validation. There's a big exit that happened. About 370 validators exited from one node a couple of days ago. So in the coming days, that ETH from there will hit the deposit pool, about 10,000 ETH, I think it is, and that's going to remove the peg basically. So I'm really hoping that at that point, once the peg is back to where it's the discount of the peg, sorry, once the peg is back to where it's supposed to go, hopefully we'll start seeing deposits come into the deposit pool again. But it's just, sadly, we've not really been able to see that yet. So once we're there, if all of us who are kind of spreading the message about our ETH kind of use some of these talking points, because look, the fact is that if you're talking about APY, we're not going to win, right? Like, Lido is better than us, basically. ETHify is better than us. There are a couple of other services that have better APYs than our ETH does. We're definitely not going to win on that because we just don't have the best numbers, right? But where we do have the best information is, the governance of the protocol, which is extremely important. The how we have slashing protection for our ETH holders, which many other protocols don't have that. Also, with this Ethereum alignment and those completely maximally aligned. And then the issue is, at the end, you don't tell people that you need to switch all their LST into rETH, but some of it, like
Yeah.
protect yourselves. And Lido is so much bigger than us that even if we get like 10% of their ETH, which would be a huge amount for us. So that those are the kind of things that people like myself, Jasper, even you, like people who kind of put the message out on Twitter and stuff. It makes sense for us to all kind of be singing it from the same hymn sheet. So we're drilling those same points to wider audience. I think that's the really important part.
Yeah, definitely. Let's move on to the rETH Growth Incubator has now closed, and we came up with 23, I think, pretty high level suggestions. I was really happy to see so many people submitting different ideas. Are you going to be on the committee evaluating this? No, you're
No.
not.
So
You're not on it.
no, the committee for valuation are Langas and Kane from the team, and we'll
Hmm.
have Samus and Noshua and I think Val, but I'm not certain who the fifth person is. But those first four, they're the ones that I know that are confirmed. But I think Val is the fifth, but I'm not sure. So they're like that's
Highly
a great
technical. Yeah.
committee, highly technical, highly aware of like DeFi stuff, and like what they think will make our ETH as strong as possible. So yeah, I think it's going to definitely work.
So yeah, I was kind of browsing the suggestions. Some of them are like marketing stuff where the GMC could, or the IMC, I'm sorry, could incentivize. Then there's other stuff that looks like it would require like smart code or smart contract changes. So there's a whole bunch for the whole spectrum. And I'm really excited to see what the committee comes out in. They're going to be ranking these into top, because there's rewards paid to the top 20 suggestions. So I'm really looking forward to it because we really need. I think we've solved the node operator side of the equation for Rocket Pool with Saturn 1 and 2. Now we got to focus on the rETH. rETH is the product of Rocket Pool, and how do we make it a better product? How we, because we need both sides to be working successfully in order for the Rocket Pool protocol to work. Last thing, Ryan Berkman's talks about here, Bitwise acquired the staking operator Attestant, and staked ETH ETFs are closer than ever. They are significantly better profit margins than means, and it means a bigger incentive for TradFi to promote ETH, because ETH or TradFi loves yield products, and staking is yield. So I wanted to ask you, Wack, this sounds cool. Perhaps I'm sure Bitwise has made a strategic decision. They see a more relaxed regulatory environment coming to the United States in crypto in 2025. And they thought, hey, how can we jump ahead of the competition here? We'll acquire Attestant because we're going to be submitting an ETF sometime soon that will have a staking feature. So this could work both ways with Rocket Pool. Rocket Pool is a staking provider. Is it competition against Rocket Pool, or is it also be beneficial to Rocket Pool? I guess it could go both ways, right?
Yeah.
Bitwise, if they have their own in-house staking service, it doesn't really do anything for Rocket Pool. Whereas if you're an ETF and you buy up, say, STETH and rETH, that could help. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword in some ways. Like for this particular instance, I think it's net maybe neutral, maybe slightly negative. For the idea of staked ETFs, it could be positive or a negative, and I'll kind of explain my thinking. So, in talking generally about staked ETFs, the idea is, for Rocket Pool, the best case scenario would be one of these ETF providers saying we are going to use our ETH as our staking token. Now, the advantage for that, of course, is that it's really, really easy to do. Especially with Saturn 2, we'll have incredibly high capacity for absorbing our ETH demand, like to the tune of millions of ETH worth, right? And that, of course, means that, if you are an ETF provider and you want a stake token, and you want those Ethereum values that we were just talking about a few minutes ago to kind of promote your token, what you do is you would get ETF money from TradFi people and then go onto the crypto market and buy mint rETH basically, and then just hold it. And that would give you a yield, and you could promote it as the most decentralized, most Ethereum aligned, blah blah blah, like whatever kind of marketing spin you want to put on it. Maybe people would buy that. Now the yield for that would be a little bit less. Like we were just talking, rETH can't really compete on the yield that much. So what they might do instead is buy a basket token, potentially like something like DSETH, which is a token that has a whole bunch of different LSTs kind of underpinning it, and even that would have like DSETH, for example, their biggest component is rETH at around 25%, and they've got a whole bunch of others at like 20% and some smaller percentages. So then that would be the second best, right? Like, is that, they come onto the market and they buy a whole bunch of different like LSTs, or they buy, like basket token or something like that. Now, those are positive for Rocket Pool. The third one, it might be that, they run their own, like if they run their own validators, and they want to do that with Rocket Pool, that would, I think, actually be the best. Well, not necessarily the best case scenario, because we still would need the rETH demand, and they would have so much ETH that it would kind of maybe like grind the protocol to a halt by being so much oversupplied on node operators. So I
Right.
think that would be something maybe we need to think about a little bit more. But that, I don't think that's going to happen really either, potentially. And then after that is when you start getting into the negatives, right? Like we start thinking about the fact that there's going to be potentially millions of ETH that is going to come online. From an Ethereum perspective, this is going to be really, really centralized stake. Of course, if they're running it themselves, then that diversifies the amount of centralized stake. Where instead of having like Lido, Coinbase, Binance, for example, being the main centralized stake services, then you'll have a Teston and a bunch of others, whoever comes up, for each of these different ETF providers. If they have their own one, then there'll be many. So maybe you'll end up with like 10 centralized staking services. So, from an Ethereum perspective, it's negative and positive.
Hmm.
From a Rocket Pool perspective, then that's when stuff starts to get negative, because as stake goes up so much, rewards will go down.
Yeah.
And, we want there to Rocket Pool to be leader of the pack instead of one amongst many. So there's some negatives, like I said, some positives, and a lot of it's going to come down to kind of how we spin it as well, like as a community. And Jasper's actually been doing a really good job of this, like over the last year or so, where once the idea that ETH ETFs were going to become a thing, he's been like putting out messaging a lot that rETH is the way to go if they want to staking tokens. Rocket Pool is the way to go, and I think that we can keep doing that, and hopefully one of these services will kind of lean into that and say, yeah, we want something like this. So it's a wait to see kind of situation. I think the staked ETH ETFs are a lot closer than other ETFs. Like there are a couple of things that I think can happen quite quickly with the ETH and BTC ETFs. One is adding staking component to the ETH ETF. The second is allowing in-kind redemptions. So you could put ETH into the ETF and they could store it, and then when you want to withdraw it, they could give you ETH back. Like at the moment, it's cash US dollar, like in and redemption. So you put your
Right.
dollars in, they convert it to ETH, and then when you want it back, then they give you dollars back. They don't give you ETH back. So that would change, and of course the staking. And I think after that is when they'll start adding new tokens, and I think they might not start adding new tokens until we get some kind of regulatory like clarity, which might be months away. The first 100 days, the legislative agenda for Congress would be in line with Donald Trump's main statements that he's been making on the campaign trail. Like crypto, while he's said things that he'll do for crypto, it's not necessarily been one of those like day one kind of things, except freeing Ross. But after that, we might be waiting 6 months, a year, maybe 2 years even, before we get any meaningful movement on crypto legislation. So I think that's going to be interesting to see. But ETH ETFs and BTC ETFs, I think they'll get the in-kind redemption and staking before potentially we see other tokens coming online with ETFs. So this is
Let's
definitely going to be one of those things that will bring a whole lot of ETH into the ETFs. Like I think the yield aspect is one that you can't overlook. It doesn't make sense to me because the appreciation of the asset is way more than the yield of the asset. Like if you could buy ETH ETF 3 months ago and ETH was $2,000, You'd rather see that go to $10,000 than buy ETH at $10,000 and get 2% returns on that. Like it doesn't make sense to me. But hey, supposedly like they love their yield, so have at it,
Yeah.
guys. But
We
it's
already
definitely
have,
going to be like,
I was wondering about the
yeah.
yield because we have 1 million validators right now. And
Hmm.
if we add thousands and thousands and thousands of new validators, and we're up to say we're up to 2 million validators, what's the yield going to be? It's going to be almost nothing. But then we talk, I guess what max, and then you talk about how does the network perform? Because I think the core devs start to worry. If you get too many validators online, it's just too much for the network to handle. And so
Yeah.
that's why they talked about max EB, so we could
Hmm.
reduce the amount of validators,
Yeah.
and that's a whole different discussion. But it looks like here what Bitwise has said is, you know what, we want to have professionals running our staking service. We'll pay them some type of management fee to run it, so we can get the full solo staking yield.
Hmm.
Whereas if they were to go out onto the market and buy a basket of like say ST ETH or ETH, there's a commission on those, and those will be the yield will be lower. So it
Yeah,
looks like
but
they've made
it's also
us.
so
It's
much easier.
well, is it because they're just gonna a testant is just gonna keep doing what a testant does, and they're just probably gonna here's a fee to pay you for your service, and it's in
but
house.
but they had to buy a testant, right? So that's like the
Correct.
cost, upfront cost, and then
Right.
securing the ETH and all that kind of stuff that all comes into it as well. So I don't know, like I don't know how it's going
Yeah.
to play out, but hey, I think it'll be good for ETH, like in terms of price, in terms of security for the network. Like things start to break the more validators you have. So max EB coming online in March or April, I think would alleviate a lot of those
Yeah.
issues. So hopefully it won't be an issue going forwards after that. But yeah, that's where we stand.
Okay. So let's move on to wins of the week. I'll do mine. I'm going to go first. It's ETH. It's the big boys. It's the markets coming alive. We it reminds me of I've seen this a few times written on Twitter and other places where it's like you got to be almost mentally crazy to be in crypto, because to go through the bear and go through all the ups and downs and the volatility, it's like the punishment for just a small window of time where you have price appreciation. It's like there's got to be something wrong with your marbles upstairs, sometimes to go through this. And even now, it's like, oh, it's great to see BTC and ETH, really racing. And every day we'll look at the markets. But then you got these other bags that aren't doing so good. And you're like, oh, man, this is doing well, this is not doing so well. Just more anxiety and all that. But in the end, hopefully we'll all be rewarded. But I think there's no free lunch in this world, Whack. If you want to get rewarded, you got to take risk, and you got to have a really solid. You can't have paper hands, as they say. You have to have diamond hands. You got to hold strong through the tough times and really believe in crypto. So that's my win. What's yours?
My win is, well, actually, before I say my win, I want to carry on, like say a little thing to the point that you made. Like with crypto, you can copy someone's trades and you can copy, their ideas, but you can't copy conviction, right?
Yeah.
And that's what it comes down to. Like you can't copy that ability to hold a token when everyone's saying that it's dead, everyone's saying that it's been left behind, and you're still there like holding on. And that's either like a really smart thing or a really dumb thing, but it still requires a certain amount of conviction. And you can't copy that, you can't copy trade that, right? And that's why I think a lot of people get burned. It's just you can't do that. And like you have to, when things get dark, you have to hold on. And it's really funny because when you look at it from like 4 years to 4 years, people are like, oh, you got so lucky. But in the middle there was some dark times there,
Oh
like
yeah.
really, really dark times. And like to hold on through that, it's not easy. But my win
It,
for the week, I
it's
think, is the
definitely not
ETH.
luck.
Sorry,
It's
carry on.
definitely like there is some luck to it for sure,
Yeah.
but it's the
Yeah.
conviction of like, and sometimes that's what if you really believe in something, it's better to just step away for a while and just don't get caught in the daily stuff, because you're
Yeah.
more likely to like panic and use emotion.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to my win for the week, I think it's the ETH ETFs actually turned flow positive for the
Yeah.
first time since day one. So on day one, ETH had, massive outflows from ETH from Grayscale, but it was offset with BlackRock and Fidelity having really strong inflows on day one of the ETF. Ever since that day, the outflows from ETH were too strong, and we actually had at one point over $600 million of net outflows from the ETFs.
Yep.
Since the election, we've been net positive, and we have had ETH's had, I think, over $700 or $800 million of inflows, and now we are in positive flow territory, and that is actually really, really great to see that there's ETH is catching a bid, and seeing BlackRock, Fidelity actually is getting really close numbers with inflows for ETH and BTC, which is really
Hmm.
promising to see. So I think it's only a matter of time before that starts reflecting in the price, and you get hundreds of millions of dollars coming in every day. That is pretty amazing. So
Yeah.
ETH had its best 3 days of inflows in the ETF in the last 3 days. So this week has just been really, really strong for ETH. So that I'm really curious to see how that's going to be going forwards. But that's definitely my win for the week, is that ETH was showing signs of life. And another sign of life for ETH, of course, is the return of the burn. So on ultrasound money this week,
Yeah.
it looks like, hopefully, well, I don't know for sure, but positive and negatives, right? So it looks like that trend of inflation for ETH has peaked, and now we are hopefully heading towards a more deflationary time. And we've had a couple of full days that have been deflationary for the first time in months. However, the negative of that, of course, is that it becomes more expensive to do stuff on chain, and it costs more money to do that. So that's negative user experience. But hey, a lot of things that people want to do, they can do those on layer twos now, and that's what we've been trying to tell people for months: is that go to layer two. There's stuff that you can do there. Don't put all your money there, of course, but it's a nice experience for transacting and stuff. So those are my wins for the week. That ETH, through all the gloom, is still showing signs of life. And then hopefully Rocket Pool, of course, had signs of life today as well, where the NETH dashboard that Invis made actually had a first uptick for the first time in nearly a year. So that is something I'm hoping that is a sign of a trend as well. So there's some
Yeah.
wins, there's some signs, and the signs of life, basically, that's my win.
Real quick we had, I think a couple 150 million. I can't remember what it was yesterday. 150 million or so of ETH of
Mm-hmm.
ETFs, but the price of ETH went down. So I'm assuming that these fund traders they got OTC. They're doing it over the counter with counterparties, kind of like peer to peer. They're not buying it off centralized exchanges.
Yeah.
Is that your understanding as well?
Yeah, so from what I'm hearing is that the BTC over the counter traders were running really low on BTC. So with them getting those $1 billion inflows this week, it seems like some of that buying might have been happening on exchanges. I don't know for
Mm.
sure. There's when the price goes up, there's always new crypto to be sold, right? Because people hit their sell targets and they just want to sell at those points. So you don't know for sure, but it looks like it might be a few weeks maybe of those inflows before you start seeing supply shock on the OTC counters for ETH. They just don't have any left,
Right.
and there's so much ETH that's staked, and of course they don't want the liquid tokens, they want actual vanilla ETH. So it's going to be interesting to
Yeah.
see what the dynamics are like. But the date I'm looking at is that first week of January. I think that's going to be a really, really telling time for ETH, just to see how people reposition and what the impact of that's going to be.
Yeah, it'll be last thing. It'll be funny is the inauguration in January will be the sell the news event. We
It might
run up
be.
so hot, and then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
boom, we have a
Yeah.
30% correction or something, right? I could see
it,
that
it
happening.
absolutely be the case, in 2021 as well, ETH BTC, the crypto peaked in April, and then it was that, by traditional technical analysis metrics, all the indicators were flashing that that was the peak of the market. And then ETH went from 4,400 down to 1,700, which is a huge
Yeah.
drop, in the matter of days or weeks, right? Really, really
Oh,
quick
I
drop.
remember.
Yeah. and
I
then
lost
and
quite
then
a
it
bit of
was
money on that.
yeah, and then it was a slow grind up, for the next 6 to 8 months, whatever it was, into October and November, when we got the second peak, and then of course ETH hit new all-time highs, BTC hit new all-time highs. But in that time, the metrics weren't actually as overheated as they were for the first rally. So I wouldn't be surprised if, things are just being pulled forward a little bit, because of course the halving moves forward every 4 years as well, and that's a nice meme. So I would not be surprised at all if we get like, a blow off top in January and then cooling down for maybe a few months, even a big retrace of like 40-50%, and then building up again for the next, part of the cycle. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on for sure.
Well, a lot to think about. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We appreciate it. Like and subscribe. Whack and I will join you next week. Whack, see you later, buddy.
Thanks, Pat. See you,
All right.
everyone.
Bye-bye.